like a traditional exit from a venture fund, or do they have to look at it in a different way? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think there's kind of two parts to that, which is like sports as an asset class and how that's developed, which is a relatively new phenomenon. And then also thinking about sort of what happens in women's sports. And I think, sports in general, prior to launching Monarch, I was at a fund called Causeway, growth stage fund focused on investing in sports and adjacent areas. And that fund was founded in 2013 when there really weren't many venture capital funds focused on investing in sports. Fast forward today, and there's probably like 30 plus funds focused just on investing in the sports ecosystem, in the venture segment of the sports ecosystem. So like the dynamics of the business of sports, how that's grown, how people really care about and are seeing the value around sports teams and sports businesses, I think is really sort of a pretty new evolution. And then even newer is this idea that private equity or venture funds, institutional funds in general, can invest in sports teams, especially in the US. When I was at Causeway, we had folks coming up to us and saying, hey, I think the leagues are gonna start changing the rules around some of this stuff. Is that something you wanna do? So I think, we're only 4 or 5 years into this really like sports investments dynamics really changing on the sports property and team side. So I think it's all evolving really quickly, and it's still a little bit like, you can look to the Arcdoses or Dials or Dynasties or others that have, started building funds and taking positions, but there haven't been so many exits in the space from the institutional players that are there. But actually, really interestingly, in women's sports, the asset value numbers that we're talking about are really different, right? It's today the valuations are 50, 100 million kind of range. And so you can go and generate a 5x return and still be talking about an asset that's sitting below $1 billion. And the number of family offices that are excited about having long-term uncorrelated assets in their portfolio in the form of sports teams is really broad, that can go and take a bite size of a 20% of $1 billion asset. Whereas, when you talk about an NFL team and you start talking about, an $8 or $10 billion asset, it's a lot harder to go and take a 20% stake. And I think there are fewer family offices that are in that buying pool.
So exits, DPI is very much top of mind these days.